Ladies, gentlemen, and travelers of all ages, as you work your way through Last Epoch, quite early on, you will find yourself in the End of Time. This is the one zone, the one hub, that is not located in any specific era related to the rest of the game. Your first time here will be right around when it's time to pick your mastery around level 15, and technically speaking, you can first approach the Monolith of Fates then, if you choose to, which is one of the main endgame activities of the game. But the earliest area available to you within this is level 58 scaled, so it's probably a little bit early for that. That said, the second that you hit level 50, the Monolith becomes a very viable activity, especially as they give you bonus experience at level 50 and above. And once you have completed the campaign around level 55 to 56, the Monoliths will become your new main activity just in general for quite a while, as they are built to be the bulk of the endgame of Last Epoch. That said, they can appear a bit complex at first, but once you know the basics of the system, it's actually relatively simple. So today we're going to break it down from a newer player's perspective, as I've been learning as I've been going myself, and I'm up to level 70 now too. Quite enjoying myself so far, so let's start off at the very beginning. To access Monoliths, you will have to go to the End of Time hub location, then simply walk to the very right side of the area. This will unlock a path to the first Monolith timeline, the Fall of the Outcasts, which is a temporal anomaly, a journey through a land where events played out differently than in our world. Here there will be a teleport waypoint, some paths forwards that are locked to begin with until you complete the timeline completion, and an interactable object that you can open up, and here you are thrown a lot of things very quickly on the UI, especially in your early Monoliths. The main focus is the stability meter up at the top of the screen. At each locked node of the stability meter that you reach, you will unlock a quest echo that you can see on the left, and click on them once they're unlocked. If you complete all of the quest echoes that are over here, the final one, which will always be a boss, you unlock the next tier up on the Monolith, allowing you to progress further into a new timeline. As well, upon defeating the boss of each timeline, you can choose a blessing, which is randomly drawn from a larger pool of potential buffs. These can range anywhere from boost 2 drops of certain types of loot to actual player power bonuses, either offensive or defensive. Generally speaking, you want to start with the power affecting bonuses and worry about the loot based ones later on, and the best way to do that is to progress up the right side of the timelines in the right path as you go up for the first time. You can do this until you reach the top, at which point you do have to complete all 3 of the Age of Winter, the Last Ruin, and the Spirits of Fire to unlock what are known as Empowered Monoliths. This is the true endgame of Last Epoch, and generally considered for level 80 and above, really, and it's essentially just higher levels of the same concept, better loot, harder enemies, better experience, all that good stuff. And there's also the corruption system, which lets you add difficulty to an area while also increasing the quality of the loot as well, and that only unlocks with Empowered Monoliths. That's the sort of macro view of it all, the sort of bigger picture, what you're trying to achieve with your early Monolith experience. But now let's dive into the more micro, the more smaller bits of each Monolith area individually, how an individual timeline works. In order to gain stability in one of these areas, which is how you unlock the actual quest echoes, you have to complete the regular echoes. Each of these little areas that you can click on within the timeline are called echoes. Once you do one, it opens up paths to more. Each echo will give you a minimum amount of stability by default that you can see by hovering over it, but also has the opportunity for bonus stability depending on how many enemies you kill as you travel through the area. Every echo also has its own general bonus rewards that you get at the end of it, from epic shards to idols to gold to experience books, tons of other things. There's tons of different bonus rewards you can actively focus as you push your way from echo to echo, depending on what you're actually after, specifically what you're trying to farm. As well, each echo will have up to 3 enemy modifiers, each one changing how the enemies inside the echo will behave. Aside from that, there are 5 sort of different types of echoes, 5 different objectives. One is the arenas. These are always labeled as an arena so you know ahead of time, and these simply plop you down in a small area and spawn waves of enemies back to back. If you survive until you've killed them all, you win. Simple as that. These are great experience and great stability too, as you guaranteed kill the maximum number of creatures possible in the area as they all spawn on top of your head, so you get the maximum stability by default. And they tend to be quite quick too, as long as your kill speed is relatively fast. Aside from that, every other objective type is focused around a larger level filled with enemies, shrines, prison runes, all those lovely normal goodies you'll find around Last Epoch, and for every one, your objective will be to either kill a certain boss, to kill a couple of patrolling enemies, to interact with some sort of node that will spawn a couple of waves of enemies that you have to defeat and then it'll fix itself, or the surprise ambush, which will come at you somewhat at random and you just sort of have to survive it. All 4 of these objective types work in a similar way though, which is to begin with, within an echo, as you won't know where the actual objective is until you kill a load of the enemies that are in it. For the ambush one, once you reach the prerequisite enemy number, which usually seems to be close to 50% of the stability meter, the second that you reach that prerequisite, the ambush will happen. A bunch of enemies will just dive down on your head. For the other objective types, it will simply give you accurate markings up to date on your map of where to go for the objective. Your next question then is probably, with stability being important for reaching higher level Monolith timelines, timelines in general and getting the empowered monoliths, and of course the true endgame that it actually is. Should you focus on getting as much stability as possible per echo, or should you focus on just completing as many different echoes as possible? Well, in my opinion, the ideal option here is to objective rush as much as physically possible, especially because the further away you get from the starting point of a timeline, the more stability an echo is worth, because you're entering unstable areas. As well, the reward from the echo happens once at the end, so technically speaking, it is more worth to you overall to just complete echoes as quickly as possible, unless they have a specifically high item drop rate affix or something along those lines that you really want to actually focus farm, in which case you want to clear out the whole thing to take advantage of that. That's basically all you really need to know about the inner workings of each timeline. We started by going over how to reach empowered monoliths in general in the first place by getting to those 3 top timelines, and once you've done that, you unlock empowered monoliths. I'm not there myself yet on patch 1.0, but the main thing that empowered monoliths give you is a much higher starting base corruption. We didn't talk about corruption with basic monoliths because you don't really need to think about it there until you reach the empowered versions of the monoliths, which is where it really starts to matter. In empowered monoliths, you get grand blessings for each timeline quest boss completion instead of the regular blessings that we got from the normal monolith. These overwrite the base monolith buffs, and they are always higher rolls of the same options as well. Again, the system does have some RNG, so if there's a specific buff that you are after, like the XP grand blessing from Fall of the Outcast, for example, you can just sort of do the quests over and over and over until you happen to get the exact blessing you're after on a good roll. I wouldn't recommend doing that for the base versions, but for the empowered buffs, absolutely. That said, within each timeline, as you progress outward further and further into a singular direction, further from the starting point of the timeline, you increase your chances of running into the Shade of Oribus boss. This boss will spawn with a different element every time, picking some random abilities from a pool that matches said element, and generally, there's just a tough fight. If you succeed, you can raise the corruption of that specific timeline, which raises the difficulty of the enemies within, but also the quality of loot and experience that you get from doing it, so you can essentially just raise every timeline up in difficulty to a point that works for you personally. On top of that, it's also worth mentioning that each timeline has its sort of bonus focuses, areas that you can use to target farm for different gear slots if you're looking to specifically upgrade one part of your equipment over another. For reference, that is bows and quivers in the Fall of the Outcast timeline, wands, scepters, catalysts, and staves in the Stolen Lance, helmets and shields in the Black Sun, chest armor in Blood Frosted Death, gloves in Ending the Storm, belts in Fall of the Empire, swords, axes, daggers, maces, and spears in Reign of Dragons, relics in the Lost Ruin, rings and amulets in the Age of Winter, and boots in the Spirits of Fire. The main way this takes effect then are actual echo nodes within the timeline. As you can see, an occasional unique or set bow or something like that, the same for quivers in the Fall of the Outcast, and its equivalent in the Stolen Lance helped me get a core part of the build that I was using at the time as well. All in all, to begin with, think of monoliths as just a continuation of the base game in the way that it works. Work your way towards the top timelines by going up the right side generally to gain more player power, and you do so by completing the echoes within each timeline until you can reach the quest echoes. Once you completed the top trio, you unlock empowered monoliths, and from there you can just build up each individual timeline to be the right difficulty for your power level, and give you bonus loot and general rewards to match the bonus difficulty levels as well, which is a main facet of the endgame of Last Epoch as a whole, and arguably the biggest of the 3 main endgame activities within this game. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and hopefully it has helped you out in understanding the monoliths. They can definitely be a bit overwhelming at first, but I find personally it's a lot more digestible to go over the larger, bigger picture side of it before diving into the individual mechanics of each of the timelines. So hopefully this flip discussion about it has helped you understand it the same way I do, because it's honestly not all that complex once you understand the base concepts. It just takes a little bit to get those base concepts drilled into your head. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.